Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hipfire podcast. It has been a couple of weeks. We had the Christmas break, and we had New Year's, and a little bit of a lack of COD action, but we're back. We had the third Challengers Cup happen this past weekend. It's pretty exciting, a lot of action there. And before we get into the results, I just wanted to say that the amateur scene has been probably the most watched now than it has been in a long time, and there's a lot of attention on it. And we talked a little bit before about how it's kind of ridiculous. There's not like a stream from the CDL's point for these matches. It's a little bit crazy, but either way, it's crazy how much support the AMP players are getting these days. And I know, like last night on different streams, you had Moch hit a K at least. You had Civ with over a K as well, and Onyx was over a K. Like a lot of streamers who not necessarily have been that popular, like guys like Onyx and Mochilla, but have been around for a while and now getting viewers, and it's awesome to see. So I do like that. But with that, we'll get into the results. So first, we're going to do EU. So yes, what do we see in the EU scene this tournament?
So EU, up until this point, I think we've sort of got an idea of who the top players are, who the challenging teams are, and what the breakdown of the scene has, at least up until this point. I mean, going into this tournament, we had a pretty definitive top four, which was X Team More, which is Dave and his team, Josh, as well as Vortex, and I'm blanking on the last guy, Nasty. Yeah, thank you for that. So you have X Team More, House Tarth, which is obviously Afro Defrag, Gizmo, and Petey. Then you have, Singularity, which is Denza, Detain, Vids, and Maple. And then you have the Rams roster, which is the Spanish roster of Journey, Metals, Nvidia, and Lucky. So those were, all those four teams had, been in the grand finals in the past two cups, each taking their turns. X Team More winning one, House Tarth winning one. So this was like our definitive top four. You had challenging teams like Obtained Esports, which is BBC Connor's team. You had Heretics making some noise at the last event. They beat House Tarth in winners, but they ended up losing later on. We had those other teams that challenged for the spots, but it was pretty strict. Okay, this is our top four. Everyone else is trying to compete to that level. But this tournament sort of raised eyebrows in that sense because we didn't exactly get that. I mean, leading up even to this event at the EEG event or online event that we had around the Christmas break, Team Heretics, which is known as Eric Boom, Method, Super, and Yako, they ended up winning that, which was and there was a lot of top teams that played in that tournament as well. Some of the top four. So to see them take it away was a bit of a signal. Okay, this team's here to play. And we ended up seeing a bracket play was something quite interesting. I mean, just to begin, teams that didn't perform as we expected, the likes of Whalers team, Whalers, Chain, Keza, and Wardy, they didn't perform too hot. They ended up placing top 16, which we'll talk about the implications for the Challengers League later on for all regions. But seeing them fall out was a bit surprising. I mean, Nolson or Weeman and Joe's team, Connect 4 also placed top 16, so not what they wanted. Hydra's team, which is Hydra, Brezzy, Quicker, and Moose, they also placed top 16. So a bit surprising that these teams were unable to make it as far as you'd expect. But in the top 8, we had some interesting performances. I mean, just looking at the bracket play, we had House Tarth go up against 3G, close 5-2 or 3-2 win. The big one was Obtained beat the Rams. So Rams, which was have made the grand finals last event, they lost to BBC Connor and Co. Singularity beat the Heretics this time around, but they entered. And then the last team that made the semifinals was Down, which is the Down of Bleeding, which is X Team More. So later on as the bracket progressed, we had 3 at the top 4 in the winter semis, House Tarth, Singularity, and Team X War. So we're like, okay, we know what to expect. This is sort of the norm. But then what we ended up seeing as the event went on was something surprising. So we saw for the first time a team Obtained make winners finals. They took down House Tarth. And looking at that roster in particular, things that stood out, I mean, we saw some of these players, in particular Hixie, at the scouting series, and a lot of coaches were talking about, oh my God, he's super talented. Look at the way he's playing. He clearly has a lot of talent as an SMG, but it wasn't just him that we saw. We saw guys like Callum in particular that really surprised me. Connor was a solid AR and that ended up winning. With regards to Team X War against Singularity, Team X War won. That gave us a losers bracket run. One of the interesting things in losers bracket is we saw 3G, which is the likes of, I believe, Aroma Disarray, who you'd recognize if you guys watch the Skyrim series. He was a guy that really impressed, I believe, guys like Revan, Genesis, and Nile. They ended up taking down the Rams. So Rams going out top 8, not what we expected from them. Moving forward, they ended up taking Singularity, and they ended up beating Singularity, which for me, I didn't get a chance to watch this match, so I don't know what happened wrong with Singularity. They're a team that I think Seth and I both expect to place top 4, so to see them lose so out early on is something interesting to see. I know the URL coach was talking about S&D being an issue, but let me just get to the top 6 as we have it here. So what ended up happening is House Tarth, they lost to Obtain, and they ended up playing Empted, which was Heretics' team. And they also lost in the Map 5 series, which, again, I wasn't able to catch much of what happened there, but also very, very surprising result. Good on Team Empted. It looks like their S&D all weekend was very strong. I mean, having a guy like Super snipe over you makes things so much easier on the map, so congrats to them. And so we have our top 6, which is 3G, Empted, Team X War, and Obtained. Or rather top 4. And what we ended up seeing was in the winners finals, Obtained actually took down Team X War. Very, very surprising matchup from there. I think, looking back at the stats from the winners finals, one thing that Vortex definitely had a very slow series. At least a slow last hard point. I was only able to catch the map 4. One of the things that stood out to me is Obtained's prowess in respawn and how Team X didn't necessarily look that comfortable in respawn. Maybe it was because they're off host, but didn't expect that from him. So Team Obtain ended up making grand finals. So what do you think about that, Seth?
Well, for me, I based a lot of the top. We had the top 4, right? We talked about before. We had S&G, House Tarth, Dave's team, and Rams. So I expected those to be the top 4 still. But like you said, like the teams that did end up surprising us, like Obtain, Empted, and 3G, they all have team like players that are really good. It's not like a huge surprise for me. Like they're very talented players. It was just about getting past those top 4 teams, and they did it this tournament. And like you said, I think you said there was like a couple of game 5s. That's the way to do
Yeah, a
it.
bunch. Yep.
Yeah, a bunch of game 5s. Yeah, if you're going to beat these teams, it has to go game 5. It has to go game 4. Like, you're going to have to play and toughen out and struggle through series. It's going to be a grind. You're not going to 3-0 the top 4 teams in the game. Like, it's not going to happen. So what I noticed, though, I didn't catch a ton of action from the EU side of things. But from what I did see, was so on Team Empted, I noticed that Eric Boom, I expected, so when I saw Eric Boom coming into this year, I expected him to be a really fast SMG, like cracked out kid because he was just turning 18. But instead, his gameplay kind of reminds me a little bit of Fire on the NA side of things, where he's young and he is incredibly skilled, but he plays smarter than just cracked out. He's not really a cracked out SMG player. Yakko's the one that gets more engagements from what I've seen than Eric Boom. So seeing Eric Boom make smart plays on the map was pretty cool. Yakko could piece for sure. Super is really good in S&D with the sniper, and then having like the vocal part of Method's game really helps. I think we were talking to Paj when the teams got announced before the Challenger seed started, and he mentioned how he thought Nvidia would be a good leader for the Rams team. It's actually interesting he said that because I think Methods is also like a really solid leader, and obviously met this Methods team with Heretics before with those same guys on the Rams. So it's interesting that they went for Nvidia and it's not for Methods because Methods' leadership seems to be on point with this team with Empted. He's guiding them well. His comms are always pretty clean and consistent. So I love what I'm seeing out of them. And then from Obtained, I didn't see a ton of action from them, but I did see Hixie. Yeah, like Yas mentioned, he was going off. And it's also funny. BBC Connor, I want to mention this quickly. He before the year started, he tweeted out that he was going to retire. I don't know if that was like bait, if he was just like wanted some gas, but the EU community did come on his Twitter and was like, no, don't retire, stay, like grind it out. And well, it worked. He won a tournament. It's nice to see, and yeah, our top 4 is still in the top 8. It's not like it was like upset city everywhere. Like when we go to the NAC next, you're going to see a lot more variation and a lot more like crazy jumps and stuff. So the EU scene is still top heavy. It's just a bigger top now, right? Like now instead of having the top 4 teams, you kind of have the top 8 really solid, which is great for competition and great for us because we get to watch closer series and like less blowout series. But what do you make of the grand final though? How did that go?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on it a little bit before the grand final.
Okay.
Some lasting thoughts. Obviously, we ended up seeing MTID make the losers run. They went all the way from losers round one, beating Zeke's team, House Tarth, Disarray and Co. and X Team More. So to make that run was very impressive. They had to play a lot of Call of Duty on Sunday, so props to them for doing so. It can never be easy, especially given the teams like having to play both House Tarth and Team X War and beat them both in a map 5 is very impressive. I know there was a bit of complaints about host going on Twitter, but you got to give credit where credit is due. They played very, very well, and to see none of the top 4 that we expect to be in the grand finals was a bit surprising. I think, like you mentioned, they're still the top 4, but it just goes to show that it's not like as solid as we thought it was. These other teams, like Team Obtained and Team Empted and 3G, can definitely put up a fight, because 3G also took down Rams and Singularity. I mean, these two teams took down all the top 4. Didn't expect that. And even Obtained took down 2 of the top 4. So yeah, as you can see, teams can be taken down. But yeah, moving through the tournament, obviously, I think from Team X War, they fell in the losers finals, and that was a bit surprising to me because, I had this team, Team X War, as probably one of the best fundamental teams. They seem to have a great understanding of the game. Maybe it's because we're kind of ahead of the game in the sense where teams are starting to learn the fundamentals, especially playing all these cups, that maybe they were caught out. I mean, they only lost the map 5, so it's hard to say, but they ended up losing to Team Empted, who made the run all the way to grand finals. In grand finals, it seemed like, ex heretics, or Empted, as I should start calling them, they sort of ran out of steam. They ended up losing 3-1. And one of the nice things about the first hardpoint, and if you can, go watch back this series, because the first hardpoint was really close. It was like 250-40. You saw one of the mistakes that a team like Empted make, and whether that be mental fatigue or just lack of in-game knowledge, because hardpoint and respawn in general wasn't their strong suit. You see the mistake they made was they had control of P5 on raid, which is like the middle hardpoint, and all they had to do was secure it. They didn't push out. They like stood in their corners, had 2 like water steps, one in the hill, and I think one was out by kitchen. They didn't push out, and as a result, you saw, Obtained able to collapse in on them, slay them on the hard point, and then get the rotation to P1. So stuff like that is something that MTID's going to need to focus on in order to successfully win these respawns. But players to note, Connor, BBC Connor, had a 1.45 in grand finals. He was our MVP. It was hard not to make Callum our MVP, because Callum looked fantastic throughout. I mean, he was making a lot of smart plays. He was playing his life correctly. He had a 1.28. He clearly knew what he was doing. He clearly was very in tune with the team, and making the right pushes when they needed to be. And as a result, they ended up playing very well, and he played very well. They ended up winning I believe it says 3-0. 3, but it was a 3-1 actually. They ended up winning. Again, it really didn't feel like, Team MTID really had a chance in the respawns. They won the S&D 6-1, so very comfortable. Eric Boone won 12-2. He's just nasty, and I'm very curious to see. I mean, they've gone from, I think, top 32 to top 8 or top 6 to now second place. So they're on the climb, and they're on the rise. So very impressive. But again, Obtain ticks it. Good job by them. I'm very curious to see how they'll play in this next event, this next cup that's coming up in just a week's time, and see if they're able to keep that level of consistency. But something tells me they will. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on the grand final.
Yeah, and just to wrap up the EU scene, the one thing I wanted to note as well is these teams stuck together. So in the NA scene, you see a lot of roster movements all the time, and you saw a bit of that here in the EU scene with Willows and Chain. Their team switched up a little bit, and then Hydra came into the mix and switched the team up. But the top teams here, none of them made a change, which is interesting to note. They all stuck together, and for teams like Obtained and Empted, when you're not seeing results like consistently, like we said, like they haven't broken the top 4 yet. To do it with the same team you started with must feel like a great accomplishment. And it also proves that you shouldn't necessarily switch teams all the time. Like Obtained Esports, we saw in the scouting series, those guys are very talented against anybody else, right? It wasn't a question of their individual talent. It was about putting it together on a team. And after not placing in the top 4, like for 2 cups in a row, it's almost a little surprising they didn't make a change, because obviously they're very good. But they stuck it out. They decided to to work on their problems and fine tune the issues and everything, and it worked out. They ended up winning. So I just like it's nice to see teams sticking together and winning because of what we see in the NAM scene so often with teams changing. I don't know if this reflects on just a more professional attitude in the EU scene or what, or maybe like there's a smaller talent pool to be fair, but still, like hopefully these guys don't get poached too quickly by top teams because I like the way they play. They play well together. The only scenario in which I could see a player in the EU scene getting snatched up or on a different roster is if like Dave's team makes a change, which I don't think they will. So I expect to see these teams still battle it out as the rosters are seen, and we'll see if the top four switches a little bit and we get some other teams into the mix. It's very
Yeah.
exciting right now for the EU scene for sure. A
Mhm.
lot of good competition, but I think with that we're going to go on to the NA scene. And here, like we said, or I said before, a lot more variation. You have two newly formed teams before the cup placed in the top six, and you had Slam jump up to top 61. They did pick up Mochila and drop a teammate for him, so that is fair. And then the Stoop Boys placed top 26, moved up to 26 places. So there's a lot more, crazy swings and teams losing out early, and it was quite a wild tournament. Obviously, we saw Westr take it still, and UTQ come second. So before this year started, those two rosters really stuck out to Yas and I. I mean, we thought Westr, and I think maybe we said UTQ was going to be better. I don't remember exactly, but those top two teams were basically the top two teams. Like we kind of expected that to happen. So to see them both play well consistently over the last couple tournaments is nice to see. I know UTQ slipped up on the first one, but they seem to be back in form. So I think in the NA scene at least, we have a pretty solid top two.
Mhm.
And it's not like EU where you have top eight. Here you have like top two, and then it's a shit show after that. But yeah, so what are some of the teams that didn't make it to the top six or even the top eight? To be fair.
Yeah, I think some of the teams that definitely caught us off guard, especially one was higher. I think a lot of people, including myself, had higher as a top two, top three team. Obviously, they had just gone through a change, losing Pentagram to BBG, and they picked up MAM as a result. But they ended up placing top 32, which, again, very shocked by this. Didn't expect that to happen for them. It was kind of, again, like I said, we were caught off guard by them placing so poorly. And one thing I wanted to mention, and this is going to be a theme throughout with not just this podcast, but especially next week after Cup 4, is that because of the limited knowledge we know about Challengers Elite, which is the top 8 teams for the amateur scene, especially in the NA scene, given how much variety or difference there has been in terms of placements, those top 8 seedings is everything. So placing well and having a bad placement like this can significantly hurt your chances of getting into that elite tournament. So, top 30, like these aren't just like, okay, they placed top 32, it's whatever. I know they had great placements in the first two cups, but having placements like this, they can significantly impact your chances of being a part of that elite tournament. But yeah, they placed poorly, a bit surprising. Royalty, again, I believe Dab Patty was the guy that ended up replacing Felony, who ended up leaving. And I thought they needed a change when they had Fellow. I think Fellow said he left on his own accord, and Fellow ended up placing way better, so good for him. But Triumph, clearly this team's not working. And whatever fashion, they placed top 32 once again. A couple other guys, Rush's team, who's from the CDL Accord. I'd like to mention him. Obviously, he's very talented, and they ended up placing top 32 as well. But those were some of like the big names that, and then BBG ended up placing top 16. So those are some of the teams that I think you could easily expect to place top 8. They didn't. Another one, Doug Censored Martin, everyone's fan favorite, placed top 32, as well as Gunjar Den's Jordan Zed. So I think that has to hurt the most because these are guys that have been in the pro league for so long, and no one's down on their skill, but they haven't even placed top 8 once, I don't think. If I'm not mistaken, as well as Aches' team, Laceville, Mox, and Noisy, they also placed top 32. So a lot of teams that, could, you could see them in that top 8 aren't. And as well as Hollow, I didn't even mention this, Cells and Hollow's team placed top 64. So, yeah, a lot of surprising performances there. But why don't you break down the bracket for us, Seth?
Well, yeah, just on that topic though, like the reason why we have that though, we have like all these teams ending in their tournaments so soon and top 64, top 32, is because of how much competition there is in the NA scene versus the EU. and naturally people are going to get bracket screwed and have to play really tough opponents early in the bracket,
Hmm.
which is one issue I do have with the Elite Series. Is I like it because guys like Westr and UT Crew won't have to grind the same way they do for these tournaments, but I don't like it because top eight is like top eight for EU is fine. Top eight for NA is so tough, like it really is. And before we get into the top teams, I just want to quickly mention with Hire and BBG. Um, I am a little annoyed. I don't know if it's gonna be announced yet or if there's just rumors, but apparently Hire might go through another roster change and stuff like that. And my response to that is basically Pentagram's one of his best assets is being a good teammate, and that also helps teams stick together. So to see him drop and the team that dropped, or to see him leave, and the team that like left with that he's no longer on are now going through another roster change is not surprising. I think Pentagram is the glue that holds a lot of teams, like can be the glue that holds a lot of teams together. And some other teams also broke up. I think we saw Hackey's team split up after this tournament,
Hmm.
and it's just a little annoying because if you're doing the Elite Series, you want the top eight teams. They're not going to be the same top eight teams at any of these events because they keep switching goddamn teams all the time. And the reason why it's a problem is because you're not going to find consistency. Like this is the same thing we've been talking about in the NAM scene for such a long time. It's the
It's
constant roster mania. It's all the time.
it was weird. Sorry, not to cut you off, but like you're
There you
100%
go.
right. You're constantly seeing changes, but like the interesting is you saw teams that don't make changes that are consistently performing bad. In that case, like if your team's consistently placing outside the top eight, okay, that makes sense. You need a
Yeah.
change. But if
Yeah.
you're like getting a top eight, like team like Higher, like I understand they're like trying to find their groove, but it's like they lose Pentagram and now it's like okay, one roster change and now they're making another roster change after the next cup. It's like okay, like you're constantly making roster changes. It's hard to find success um, and
Yeah.
consistency. So I understand the allure of like these teams, like Mooch's team, and we'll get to them as we talk about the bracket of these teams that make changes and actually perform very well. But like you can't be certain of the consistency. Like Team UT Crew placed outside the top eight, right? The first event,
Yep.
and then they've
Yep.
consistently improved. And although I have issues with that roster. Not necessarily the roster itself or the talent, but we'll get to that later. But
Yeah.
it shows that you can consistently improve with the same team.
Yeah, you can improve. I know what you're saying. Like if you consistently don't get good placements, then yeah, you may have to make a change. But it's after making a change after one tournament, it's a little bit much. Like it's a little bit quick. If you could quickly identify a player who's toxic or doesn't fit the groove, I get that. Like that makes sense. But at the same time, what do we see in EU? Obtained and the Heretic squad or whatever the team emptied, they placed and they won and they placed top second, and those two teams had stuck together. Like it works. It does work. So I hope we see less roster mania and teams try to figure it out because it's more rewarding when you win with the same team, and also it just like builds better character. I think it builds you better as a teammate. It's a lot easier for these players to go through a season with the same teammates, not have to worry about switching teams all the time, and must build anxiety. And also, you only have 1 week between cups. It's not like you have that much time to practice
Hmm.
with a new squad.
Yeah.
But that being said, we have our top six here. I just want to make some quick notes before Yas gets super into it. So, from what I saw, Slammed is the first team I want to mention. So that's the team with Onyx, Teskey, or Tasiki. I think it's Teskey. Scrap,
Yeah.
and Mochilla. Moch, Moch placed top three at a Challengers Cup. I'm laughing because I love Moch, and we all love Moch, and he was a coach like a year ago. Decides to come back and play, and you could tell that coaching has helped him be a leader for this team. So right now he's teaming with all those young, S&D and young stars, and it's nice to hear him before respawn games and also during vetoes become that vocal leader for them. And I know they were doing vetoes before, and they were all just like, "Yeah, Moch, what do you want to do?" Like going, like looking for him for guidance and to have him run the whole thing. So for a team like them, where you have a bunch of young guys, it's really nice having Moch kind of guide them. But also, they're the only team I think in both regions to allow for comms and S&D, and they did not mute the comms, and that was very nice of them to do because it was really eye-opening. I actually loved that. Like it was really interesting to see how they were calling mid-round strats, who was making the calls, what decisions they're making in the middle of rounds and before rounds, and Onyx really impressed me. So Onyx came from a crew who used to play with Illy back in the day, and he would basically have perfect reads against his opponents. He said that Westr were his sons in S&D because they did beat Westr in S&D. They lost the other 3 game modes, but that's neither is Westr. What are you supposed to do? Um, but in the S&D, they did prove to be too good, and they were winning like all their S&Ds. And Onyx was really really vocal in that, and Tetsky as well, I should mention. But it was really nice to hear him kind of he knows it comes to the background in S&D, and he's going to use that, right? He's not going to cower behind Moch's leadership. In a game mode that he feels confident in, he's really going to start talking and calling plays. And when you look towards the CDL and player and teams like that, if you pick up an S&D star or a player who used to grind a ton of S&D, please do listen to him at S&D. Like I have noticed teams in the past who do pick up S&D players as either coaches or subs or whatever, and their S&D continues to be pretty poor. That obviously means they're not listening. These S&D kids play the game all the time. They've played Surge for years. They know how it works. Listen to them, because when Slam was listening to Onyx's calls and the mid round strats, it was working. They were playing great. They played one round of Garrison S&D where they made one mistake the entire map and won it 6-2, and it was one of the most impressive S&D matches I've seen out of an AM team in a long time. So very, very cool for Slammed. I don't know if they can place in the top 6 consistently because their respawn really lacks, but it was really fun to watch them go that far. And the other team I wanted to mention as well was the Stoop Boys. So what a weird name. But the Stoop Boys is Glory, BZ, Spacely, and Turiel. And what a good feeling for these guys. They just grinded, made it. And Spacely always feels like he finds these like random players to play with in the AM scene and end up doing pretty well with them. So he's kind of like the Moch effect a little bit there. But also seeing a guy like BZ and Glory, they've been around for a while. So to see them still be able to compete in a tougher AM scene than it used to be is pretty cool. There are some times when I see the lists and of all the AM teams where I think like, oh, like this guy's been in the AM scene for so long, like, and it sucks because they're not gonna, like, it's tough for them to make the league. And now with the more competitive AM scene, do they have a chance to make it? So it's nice to see that they do. It's nice to see that like the AM players who've been around forever are still competing at a high level and aren't getting like pushed aside by former pros. But yeah, so what do you make of the NA scene?
Yeah, the like you mentioned, I think across all challenger scenes we had a lot of mission mash, or and just different teams coming up on the rise. But I mean, the one consistent in that is Westr. Westr, throughout this tournament, they handled their business. There were times that they definitely looked a little bit more vulnerable compared to past cups. I mean, they were taking a game 5 against NYSL, or Dior as they call themselves. They dropped a match against Slam, which is Mocha's team. I believe that was the S&D, or I'm assuming. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. But what we ended up seeing with them is they ended up making winners final again, beating Sib and Co, both in winners and grand finals. So they look very comfortable. Before I get to grand finals, another team that ended up making grand finals was Sib's team, UTC. They obviously improved quite a lot from the first cup, as we mentioned. One of the things that impressed me about them, especially, was I think you saw them. I think their communication was better. It's still not perfect. Don't get me wrong, but they definitely seem to be more on the map. I believe Dylan, or Rex, as he's known, is the one that's calling out a lot. From what I could tell from the comms, I may be wrong on that, but he's the one that I noticed most. Telling the team to slow down, play together, and you saw them perform very well as a result. And not just S&D. I mean, they were grinding. I think they kept picking Miami S&D, which served them very well in most of the matches they were playing, except grand finals. But we'll get to that. So they were very, very dominant at that. Obviously, Sib as a sniper helps because he's so aggressive and talented. But throughout the tournament, they looked very, very strong. They looked like they were playing towards their potential. What we saw in grand finals, though, was I can only describe as very frustrating as a UTC fan or as a Sib fan. The first map happens. They go up. It's raid hardpoint. They go up by quite a lot. It goes to P4, which is basketball hardpoint. They're up by I want to say 40 or 50 points, and they get a good pinch going. They manage to have 2 people hitting the front, and there's the only person left in hill is Polyax, and Paul who's up to that point he wasn't having a great map. He ends up getting a massive 2-piece with a pistol, playing his life perfectly, getting both kills on UTC. They end up getting the rest of the time on P4 and then go to P5. Ended up just absolutely slaying out UTC. The UTC is not able to set up whatsoever. And so a map that was, looked to be going their way was taken out of their hands because Westr clutched up, by great plays again by the likes of Paul. And so for UTC, it's a map that you look, okay, that's very frustrating. It shouldn't have happened. And then you go on to map 2 in Miami S&D, something that Sib and Co have been dominant at, and they end up going. They should have been up 4-1. I think they lost a 1v3 that was kind of tragic, and then at the end they had a 1v2. And Paul has a great angle. I wonder if other teams will take note of that. In S&D, was sniping across to the bomb, and once Sib and Co pick up on this, they don't exactly challenge at the same time. I know it's a very difficult gunfight, but Paul, slide Charles out and snipes Sib, which definitely I don't think he was expecting. And as a result, I can't remember who the second player was in that, but whoever it was wasn't really going to have time to kill him and get on the plane as a result. So again, they ended up losing that map. I believe it was round 11, if I'm not mistaken, or 6-4. They lost 6-4. So again, 2 maps that they should have had. Westr clutch. It's just it's a tale of 2 stories. Wester's clutching up, but at the same time, UTC is like letting these maps fall from their hands. And the worst, in my opinion, was the control. And I listened to the comms during the control, and holy shit, the UTC was losing it. They went up 2-0 in the control. UTC should have had it, that map, compared to other maps. They should have had that one in the back. You're up 2-0. You shouldn't be losing these maps. It didn't look like a lot of the Western guys were in it to begin with, and they let them come back into the map. And one of the things that I want to talk about is the communication. Although it's gotten better, you can hear them arguing mid-map. Rex and Sib getting into it mid-map. The Rex is telling him to slow down. I understand Sib was in a tough spot, and he tries to hide away, and he ends up dying. And you hear Rex say, well, dude, you got to call that out. And Sib's like, dude, I couldn't. I was like in this corner. And even I think, other pros that were in the chat are like taking note of it. Like, what the hell is going on? You're mid-map. Why are you arguing? And you could tell after they lost that first round, when they were up 2-0, like they just lost it. The map was over at that point. There was no coming back from that, because they were in that mindset that, okay, like, we just lost this map, we're losing it, we're losing control, losing focus, we're arguing. And as a result, you saw them proceed to lose every round of control after that and lose the series. And it's like, it really is very confusing for a team like this. Why are you arguing mid-map? Like, you got to focus up. Someone's got to be that control. I don't understand why Sib and Dylan or Rex got into it like that. I know Rex didn't have the greatest grand finals for himself. And quite frankly, none of the guys really performed all well outside of Jimbo. He had a great grand finals. But outside of him, everyone else sort of underperformed against this Western team. And I think what you saw is there's shades of UTC being able to beat Western, because every single map they could have taken. So, that's something that's easy to know. I almost see a 3-0. Oh, Wester's dominant again. I don't think so anymore. I think Wester's definitely defeatable and beatable. But UTC, they got to get rid of that. I mean, even like in the match before, I know I'm rambling on now, but even the match before when they won against Slam's team, you could hear Sib, acting a bit cocky, saying like, hey, like, put the sniper away, you can't snipe me. And they respond back, and you hear them go back and forth, and the guy takes a shot at Sib saying good luck on phase, and he's like, you damn right I will, like, I'm getting paid to do this shit. And it's like, I don't know why Sib has to act like, I understand like COD's about trash talking and everything, and people do it all the time on Twitter, but it's like, you're trying to get to the pro league, you got to start acting more professional, and I feel like stuff like that isn't really going to help you in any way, shape, or form. So I think, for that team, if they want to get over that hump and beat a team like Western, they need a bit more maturity, especially in their comms. But it was just something I wanted to note, because it was crazy to see.
Well, yeah, on your point though, it's a good point to mention, because professionalism and that kind of stuff, because we saw a couple players over the weekend get picked up as substitute players. Mm-hmm. So that was Neptune and Prolute, I believe, both got sniped up.
Prolute's in a different scenario. He's not exactly a sub. He's just on their academy team.
Ah, damn it. Well, you know what? Byron will get his chance. I have faith. He's nasty. Okay, that's fair. But still, at the same token, though, you do notice that these teams do go for more mature players. Like, I know Sib's on a sub spot in phase, but question about his maturity don't really matter when you're that skilled. Like, he is actually that good individually. We all know that. But in terms of making it to the next step, there is a certain amount of professionalism you have to have. And even though there was a lot of trash talk this weekend, and Onyx can attest to that. um, for some comments about cheating and stuff like that, and then whatever happens. Um, but what I was trying to say is basically there's a certain level where if you want to make the next step to the pro league, you do have to play like a professional and have a serious attitude and be willing to grind the game and not get into arguments where you blow the whole team up. And a good example of this kind of thing is like Mac, Awakening. Like both of those two guys, obviously incredibly individually talented and did very well in the CDL, making their teams better than they were before. But they also both listen a lot. Like they don't argue a ton. They're both humble players. They don't have like crazy Twitter tirades, and they don't like go off roasting people because they let the gameplay speak for itself. So you can have different styles. There's nothing wrong with that. You can be cocky if you want to be, but at some point, if you want to make it in the CDL and you want to make it far, there does have to be some kind of ring of it's a job and take it seriously kind of thing. Which it does seem like AMP players today versus before are taking it more seriously for sure. Like they are grinding more hours. They're practicing. They're scrimming. It seems like they're scrimming like pro teams at times as well, which must help. So it's nice to see that the AM scene is, like we said before, big in the podcast. It's getting more attention and also being taken more seriously, which is a great setup for when COVID eventually does end. Like when we do get lands and we do get people getting picked up from Europe back over to North America, it's going to be incredibly talented players. The talent pool is widening. So when we get an expansion, hopefully in the future, we're going to see a lot of these players make it and compete at a high level. And it's going to be great. Like it's exciting to see these guys really start to take this seriously and how competitive the AM scene is getting. I know a couple of pros were tweeting out during the AM scene, during the cup, like, oh, I missed 2Ks. I miss like what it feels like to compete. And like all this, like I know Sasha was saying that. And obviously some people responded with like, you don't have to deal with host wars or whatever. But I don't know if they're forgetting how it used to be, but host wars is like the least, like the smallest problem back in the day when we used to have 2Ks. It was a mess. Like it was horrible. So to see how it's progressed, it's been pretty good. And I hope this like the Elite Series turns out to be good, and we keep seeing more support for the AMC because it is in a good spot right now. And just to kind of wrap up my thoughts on the NA side of things, like I said, the EU has top 8. There isn't really a solid top 8 in the NA scene. Like basically a top 2. But we do kind of know who the most talented players are. We're getting a pretty good idea this year of who really stands out and who maybe did better last year versus this year. And so I hope we continue to see like just the only thing I want to see is more consistency. I don't love seeing roster mania. I don't love seeing teams split up because of one cup performance. Like it does kind of suck. And if one person leaves one team, you're gonna have a trickle down effect where there's a bunch of teams making changes. That's the way it works, right? So in terms of sub spots, I know there's a couple that are still up for grabs. There's plenty of good players to choose from. So I hope the coaches and general managers are watching these cups and keeping a close eye on who's looking good because a lot of these people deserve chances and they'll get them. So yeah, with that being said, well, why don't we go on to the APAC scene briefly here? So in APAC, we have a new champion. It's finally happened. The Chiefs have won. Renegades did not win this tournament. It ends their like 19 tournament streak, whatever the hell it was. We have a new champion. I'm very excited. It is awesome to see. And the hilarious part about it is the Chiefs won and finally like won a tournament without having to play the Renegades. They didn't even beat them. I thought that's like the funniest thing. Is like the Chiefs just can't get past the Renegades. So finally other teams beat the Renegades, so the Chiefs don't have to do it. So basically what happened is in the winners bracket, Void ended up beating Renegades 3-2. So Void is a team with Restalling, Cronus, Limax, and Sokka. They ended up upsetting Renegades, and then they lost the Chiefs in winners finals in a game 5. And then in the losers bracket, Renegades ended up losing to Equilibrium, which consists of guys that are pretty well known. Like
Man of Chicken.
Man of Chicken got it done. He actually did it. The Mad Lads. I don't know James and Mido that well, but good on them. They pulled it off. So they beat Renegades in a game 5. So Renegades do lose out both in game 5s. And then Void make it to the back for a rematch against the Chiefs, win the first series but lose the next one 3-1. So at the end of the day, the Chiefs do win. I wonder how it feels for them. Like they must feel pretty awesome that they won, but they also didn't have to play the Renegades. So I expect like the competitive spirit, and then probably says like, I wish we could play them, beat them, like we're good enough now. But they got they kind of sidestep past them, and Crimsa gets to win one this year. Good for him. And Setsi as well. So yeah, I don't know what changed because it seemed like Renegades had their foot on the pedal, but awesome to see. Now we have another competitive scene. I'll just leave. Obviously, we have to see more consistency out of this. It's not. We can't just assume it's going to happen again. Like I still think Renegades are the best team. I know recency bias is going to like mess with everyone, like, but that Renegades are the best team still. But very awesome to see a competitive scene there in APAC. And Japanese teams, like we mentioned last time, are continuing to play well. Two of them plays top 16, one of them plays top 8. So, they're not like in the top 32. Like they're still playing competitively, so it's nice to see from them. And I'm sure like host wars must screw them up a lot too. I can't imagine how that goes.
Yeah.
Talking about host wars, you got people in Japan playing people in Australia, so it could always be worse. And yeah, so awesome for the Chiefs. But kind of to sort of touch on everything as a whole, this cup. Um, it sucks because at the end of the day, like they mentioned, a lot of the pros are talking about, a lot of the AIM players are talking about this on Twitter, and feeling disheartened because there's not a ton to play for still, right? You're playing for these cups and you're winning like $1,000 or $2,000 each tournament, but that's kind of where it stops, especially for the EU scene because of visa situations and because you're not going to likely get picked up on a team. It does kind of stop at that, you know, the prize is basically all you really get for winning. So for now, it does kind of suck. But the one thing I want to say to these players, if they're watching, which they probably aren't, but if they do, or maybe we can echo this statement on their streams and on Twitter and stuff, is at the end of the day, like you are still playing for that CDL spot, that guaranteed at least minimum 50K roster spot. Like that is what you're playing for, and it may feel tough right now with the pandemic and with visa situations, but it's not going to be permanent. And if you stick it through and you make good connections and you really take the game out of professional stance, you do have a chance at getting into that spot and making that 50K and making the COD, your COD career a reality. And it might feel disheartening for now, but there's a lot of players who are very dedicated and will make it. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Basically, it's going to get better, and we'll get lands again. It just sucks right now, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts to conclude?
No, I think you produced summed it pretty well. I'm looking forward to Cup 4, which many presume is the last one for Challengers Elite. Hopefully we'll get some news on that. Please, CDL, pick it up, because quite frankly, it's embarrassing that you're not spreading more eyes on the incredible talent that we have showcased. But yeah, again, looking forward to seeing what happens if what we see here is actually a representation of where we are, or maybe it was just a one-off event. But with that being said, please like, subscribe, comment, let us know what you guys think, who really stood out to you in the Challenger scene, and what you want to see in the future.
Yeah, and also all highlights that we get during the scene are all gonna be up on our Twitter on Hipfire P. So check that Twitter out. I'll leave it in the description below. So if you want to see different highlights that we call on people's streams, you can check it out there. And yeah, that's all from us. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you for the next weekend's cup.
See you.